Imagine a nation deciding that a signature megaproject, one that would reshape a whole region's daily life, should be built without borrowing a cent. No foreign loans. No interest clocks ticking. Just national will, careful budgeting, and steady progress. That nation is Tanzania. And the project is a record-setting bridge across the Mwanza Gulf of Lake Victoria that many expected would require international lenders. It didn't. It stands finished, open, and already changing the rhythm of life in the country's lake zone. If you live in the United States, you know how we typically fund big infrastructure, municipal bonds, federal grants, low-interest loans, and sometimes private partnerships. That can work well, but it can also mean long debates over debt and decades of repayment. Tanzania chose a different path for this bridge. The headline you clicked wasn't hype. The country funded the build from its own coffers. That choice matters not just for Tanzania, but for any country asking whether growth must always come with more debt. Let's start on the water. For generations, the crossing between Kigongo and Busisi meant ferries. Drivers lined up. Families waited. Trucks carrying farm produce and manufactured goods crept forward at a shuffle. Schedules slipped. A simple journey could stretch deep into the day. When the wind picked up or maintenance dragged, the delays stretched further. Now, what used to be a nerve-testing part of any itinerary has become routine. You roll onto a modern highway, glide over the water, and in minutes you're on the other side. The bridge doesn't just shorten a trip, it changes how people plan their day, how businesses plan their logistics, and how the whole region thinks about time. The structure itself is a feat officially named the John Magufuli Bridge. It arcs across the Mwanza Gulf and links Tanzania's Mwanza and Geita regions. Engineers designed it with a low pylon, extra-dosed cable-stayed system. Think of it as a hybrid that borrows the efficiency of cable-stayed bridges while keeping the deck slim and stiff for heavy traffic and big winds. The deck is wide, with dual carriageways separated by a median, emergency lanes for breakdowns, and walkways on both sides for pedestrians. In plain terms, it's built for real-world use, not just photographs. It was inaugurated in mid-June of the year it opened, after years of persistent work that began before the pandemic and kept going through supply shocks that snarled projects worldwide. The project also upgraded approach roads, meaning the bridge sits on a modernized corridor rather than a bottleneck of old pavement. Now, about that financing choice. Most countries taking on a project of this size look straight to multilateral banks or export credit lenders. That can unlock capital and technical expertise, but it also creates long-tail obligations. Tanzania's government decided to make this one a domestic effort. Budget allocations were set aside, revenue collection was tightened, and payments were made as work advanced. It's not that the country rejects loans. Tanzania does use external finance for other projects, it's that this particular bridge became a statement. We can finish this with money we raise ourselves. That creates a very different kind of legacy. There's no loan amortization tied to this structure, there's national ownership from day one. If you've ever managed a household or run a business, you sense the discipline that implies. Pay-as-you-go means you can't hide overruns behind borrowed time. It forces transparency on a schedule and a budget. It also channels pride, because every paycheck that funded this concrete and steel came from within the country's economic engine. Think of how that feels when you drive across it for the first time. This is ours, in design choices, in funding, and in purpose. Let's talk purpose. The lake zone is a vibrant economic basin. Farmers move tomatoes, bananas, cotton, and fish. Miners move equipment and ore. Traders move everything from household goods to spare parts. Until now, the ferry created a natural choke point. With a proper highway crossing, supply chains become more reliable. Trucks deliver on tighter schedules. Perishables stay fresh. Transport costs fall over time as predictability replaces contingency planning. And that creates second-order effects. Sellers can promise delivery windows to buyers, transport firms can schedule more runs from the same fleet, and towns on both sides of the Gulf attract investment because investors can count on access. There's also safety and dignity in reliability. Parents no longer gamble on whether they'll make it to a clinic or a school event across the water. University students headed to exams, shopkeepers restocking, and hospital staff rotating shifts all move with fewer unknowns. It's the kind of life upgrade that doesn't always make headlines but shows up in the small, human moments that define a week. From an engineering perspective, a bridge of this span in this location demanded a careful plan. The foundation work had to respect the lake's ecology while anchoring pylons to handle dynamic loads. Fabrication and erection required the sort of choreography that only comes from experienced crews. Tanzania's roads agency oversaw the project, while specialist contractors delivered the superstructure. The result is a modern deck that is not just long, it's robust. It's designed for decades of service, with resilience built into the bearings, the cables, and the roadway itself. You can see the design logic in every element: roomy lanes, a median to separate opposing traffic, protected walkways, and allowances for future maintenance without paralyzing the corridor. A project like this doesn't float above politics and policy. It sits right inside them. What Tanzania is signaling is not hostility to outside partners, but confidence in domestic capability and fiscal management. The country still works with development banks and foreign investors on other infrastructure, from rail to ports to energy. But the bridge offers a case study in selectivity. You can choose which projects to finance internally and which to seek external capital for, based on strategic priorities and cash flow realities. Why does that shock the World Bank in the title you clicked? It's a rhetorical way of saying this outcome defies the usual script. Many observers assume that megaprojects in low and middle-income countries always require external loans. Here, a country bucked the pattern at a headline scale. That challenges a reflexive assumption about dependency and invites a more nuanced conversation about how nations blend domestic revenue, concessional loans, and private capital in smarter ways. There's also a story here about execution. It's one thing to announce a debt-free project, it's another to deliver it. This bridge faced the same headwinds that hit construction sites from the Americas to Asia: price spikes in steel and cement, shipping delays, labor constraints, and the need to phase work around weather windows on a vast lake. Staying on track required procurement discipline, technical supervision, and timely payments. When you pay from domestic funds, missed payments show up instantly on site. When you keep paying, work keeps moving. Simple, but powerful. Zoom out again to the US audience. We debate how to rebuild our bridges, our rail, our water systems. We've passed major federal packages, and still, costs and delays bite. What could we take from this Tanzanian example? First, the power of clarity. Define the benefit in everyday terms people can feel, like shaving unpredictable hours off a commute or making fresh produce cheaper because trucks don't idle in a ferry queue. Second, build the approaches as seriously as the span. A bridge that ends in a bottleneck is a promise half-kept. Third, match financing to the project's nature. Not every project needs the same tool. Sometimes pay-as-you-go instills rigor, other times long-term borrowing makes sense because the benefits accrue for generations. The point is to choose on purpose, not by habit. Now, imagine the economic knock-ons for the lake zone over the next few years. Logistics parks and fuel depots cluster at interchanges. Cold chain warehouses spring up to support fisheries and horticulture. Tourism to the lake and onward to the Serengeti becomes easier for domestic and regional travelers. Small towns try out bigger ambitions: food processing, light manufacturing, regional wholesale markets, because they have a dependable artery right outside of town. And as traffic builds, the bridge's wide deck and emergency lanes reduce the odds that a single breakdown snarls everything behind it. What about resilience? Lakeside environments can be unforgiving. Heat cycles, heavy axle loads, and wind shear all do their work. That's why the deck and cable system, the drainage, and the expansion joints were chosen to spread stresses and allow inspection access. It's why the walkways are not an afterthought. They give crews safe space during maintenance, and they give communities a dignified way to cross without a vehicle. Good bridges move traffic. Great bridges serve people in more than one way. We also need to talk about the social fabric around a project like this. Large builds can bring dust, detours, and disruption. The true test is whether people feel heard along the way and whether local talent participates. This project drew a big local workforce alongside international specialists, hands on rebar, formwork, surveying, concrete pours, and quality control. Skills learned here are transferable to the next generation of national projects. That is part of the return on investment that spreadsheets don't capture. Critics will ask fair questions. Could those funds have built more miles of rural road instead? Would a loan have freed up budget for health or education in the short term? Did external contractors capture too much of the value? These are real debates, and they should happen in the daylight. But they don't erase the core achievement. A strategically vital crossing exists today because a country decided to build it now, and to own it outright on opening day. There's also a regional angle. Tanzania sits at the heart of East and Central African trade corridors. The bridge feeds into a trunk road network and complements a modern rail build-out pushing toward the lake. As those links tighten, cross-border commerce with Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and the Democratic Republic of Congo benefits. When inland transport becomes more reliable, ports on the Indian Ocean see steadier flows, and exporters anywhere along the chain can promise delivery windows with more confidence. If you want to see what leadership looks like in infrastructure, watch what happens after ribbon cutting. Does the maintenance budget stay funded? Do road safety campaigns ramp up to match higher speeds and higher volumes? Are weigh stations and enforcement in place to protect the deck from overloaded trucks? Do local governments update zoning to avoid chaotic sprawl at the new access points? Smart stewardship after opening day is what turns a shiny new bridge into a genuine engine of prosperity. Tanzania has a chance to set that example, too. Let's bring it back to you, watching from the US. If you care about public works, about what we can learn from the rest of the world, this story should be on your radar. It's a reminder that ideas worth copying don't always come from the places we expect. It's also a reminder that financial independence and international cooperation are not opposites. You can self-fund one project and borrow for another. You can hire global specialists and still build national capacity. You can insist on design quality and still deliver on time. The old binaries, local versus foreign, debt versus cash, big versus small, are less useful than a single, stubborn question. What mix gets the best results for the most people, right now and for years to come? Before we wrap, consider how narratives shape reality. A sentence like, "built without a penny of debt," can sound like chest thumping. But what if it's simply an accurate description of a choice made, and an invitation to rethink the menu of choices available to every government? That's not bravado. That's a blueprint worth studying. Now I want to hear from you. If your city or state could fund a major piece of infrastructure without borrowing, would you prefer that over taking on long-term debt? What trade-offs would you accept? Slower build schedules, tighter budgets, or narrower scope to make that possible? If you live in a region where a ferry still dictates your day, what kind of bridge or tunnel would most transform your life, and why? And if you work in construction, finance, or logistics, what's the most overlooked detail that separates a smooth-running project from a headache we all complain about for decades? Thank you for staying with me. If this story gave you a new lens on infrastructure, support this channel by subscribing, liking this video, and sharing it with someone who loves big builds and smart policy. Drop a comment with your take on debt-free megaprojects, or tell me which project you want me to cover next, from Africa, the Americas, or anywhere bold ideas are turning into concrete and steel. Your comments help shape future episodes, and your subscription helps this channel keep doing deep dives with the nuance these stories deserve.